Today we are going to use a formula to solve quadratics. That formula is called the quadratic formula. We got this quadratic formula by deriving it from completing the square. We use this when the quadratic is prime, so that means we cannot factor it or solve it using square roots. And actually, the quadratic formula will work every single time to solve a quadratic. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Now that is all over 2a. Where we get these numbers, the a, b, and c, is from our standard form of an equation. ax squared plus bx plus c. That's where we get those terms to be able to plug in for a, b, and c. Now that number b squared minus 4ac, the number underneath the radical, that has a special name. It is called the discriminant. The discriminant tells us how many solutions that we'll have and what kind of solutions that we will have. So for instance, b squared minus 4ac, if that number is greater than 0, we will have two real solutions. So two real solutions. That means it crosses the x-axis twice. If b squared minus 4ac equals 0, we'll have one real solution. That means it crosses the x-axis one time. Then b squared minus 4ac, if that number is less than 0, we're going to have two imaginary solutions. That means we will have an I with our answer. So for instance, if we were to graph these, if you look, if it has two real solutions, it'll cross our x value, our x-axis, twice. So right here and here. If it is equal to 0, it'll cross our x-axis once. So right here. And then if it is less than 0, it'll cross it at 2 points. It won't even cross our x-axis. This is an example. Okay? It's out in the open. So now, to solve these, first thing I need to do is get this equation in standard form. So that means I want all my terms on one side of the equal sign. So for this problem, I have to subtract 7 from both sides. So I have x squared minus 5x minus 7 equals 0. So now I'm going to go ahead and label these A, B, and C. And I'm going to plug those into my quadratic formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now all I'm going to do is plug those numbers in for a, b, and c. So negative b, so b is negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b, which is negative 5, squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c is negative 7. All over 2 times a. A is 1. So now to simplify it, negative times negative 5 is positive 5, plus or minus square root Well, negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 7 is positive 28. So 25 plus 28 is 53. All over 2 times 1 is 2. Now my discriminant, the number underneath the radical, is 53. So that tells me I'm going to have 2 real solutions. I will not have an I in my answer. So 53 is greater than 1. It's 2 real solutions. There's my final answer. Because now, can I simplify that radical? No. Seven x minus 5x squared minus 4 equals 2x plus 3. Get all of your terms on one side of the equal sign first. Now I always like to keep my x squared term, I want that to be positive. Right now it's negative, so I'm going to add 5x squared to both sides. So that means I have to move the 7x by subtracting it from its like term over here. And I have to get rid of the 4, so I have to add 4 and add it to here. So writing this in standard form is 5x squared, 2 minus 7 is negative 5x, 3 plus 4 is 7. Now I'm going to use my quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So a is 5, b is negative 5, and c is positive 7. So now I'm just going to plug those numbers in. Negative b, so negative times negative 5, plus or minus square root b squared, so negative 5 squared, minus 4, times a, which is 5, times c is 7. All over 2 times a, so 2 times 5. Now I just have to simplify it. Negative times negative 5 is positive 5. Plus or minus. Well, negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Times 7 is negative 140. So 25 minus 140 is negative 115. Now that's my discriminant. It's less than 0, so I'm going to have 2 imaginary solutions. Okay, so square root of negative 115 all over 10. So now, I do not like radicals underneath the denominator, so I can bring that I out. Now, can you break down 115? Well, we know any number that ends in a 5 or a 0 can be divisible by 5. 115 divided by 5 is 5 and 23. So 115 cannot be broken down any farther. So 5 plus or minus I radical 115 over 10. There's my final solution. Now sometimes though with these problems, if we can break down the solution, we will have to simplify it, okay? You look at the numbers on the outside of the radical, 5, 1, and 10. Can you simplify those? No. 1 is already simplified. This problem, 2x squared equals negative 4x plus 4. The first thing I'm going to do is add 4x and subtract 4 from both sides. So I have 2x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 0. Now, just like with any other problem, we can factor, look at these 3 terms. We can factor those numbers. Divide them all by 2 because they're all divisible by 2. So I'd have x squared plus 2x minus 2 equals 0. So all we're doing is just simplifying these so that we can use the smallest numbers, that we can work with. So now I'm going to plug those numbers into my quadratic formula. Okay, so negative x equals a, b, and c. So negative b, so negative 2 times positive 2, plus or minus square root b squared, so 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 2, all over 2 times a. So now I'll just go ahead and simplify. So I have negative 2 plus or minus square root 2 squared is 4. Okay? Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. So 4 plus 8 is 12. All over 2. So now, radical 12. Can you break radical 12 down? Yes. Radical 12 is 4 times 3. 4 is a perfect square, so I can bring a 2 out. So radical 12 breaks down to 2 radical 3. Sorry, this should be a 3. All over 2. Now, look at those numbers on the outside of the radical. Negative 2, 2, and 2. These can all be divisible by 1. By 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So my final answer would be negative 1 plus or minus radical 3. Now sometimes you may get your answers, like you might be able to find the square root of radical 12. Okay, or say this was radical 16, so you'd get 4. So you'd have negative 2 plus or minus 4 all over 2. You'd have to actually simplify that to find your 2 actual answers. Okay, completing the square, you use the same formula every single time. So your first step is to get all your terms on one side of the equal sign. Okay, get them all on one side of the equal sign, then figure out a, b, and c. Plug those into the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that is all over 2a. Have a good day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.